Well, today we're going to make another tape. I seem to have a little trouble here, get this thing to work properly, but we'll see if we can do it. Today is December 20th. Been a couple of days since we were on this machine, and at times it's ornery. It doesn't do what I want it to do. But if we push the right buttons, I guess, in the right sequence, everything will be all right. Well, today, the last time we were on this, we quit about the 21st of 1st of March is when we were on it last. And so we'll just pick out a few things here and there as we go along in this diary of Dad's from 1914, 15, and 16. Now, a lot of the people that are mentioned here, you probably remember as older people, and of course I remember a lot of these people just about in this time. I remember it goes back to just about when I was 2.5 to 3 years old, somewhere in there, where I can recall a lot of these things that happened. It says here, for example, on March 22, Sunday, March 22, 1914. It says, a ride to Calcite by automobile with Frederick and Detloff. Now, I imagine it was Bob Frederick and Charlie Detloff. Charlie Detloff was his good friend, and Charlie had a car, one of the people in town who had the early cars. On Monday, the 23rd of March, it says Mrs. Ulrich and daughter came for dinner. Now, I imagine those were the Ulriches from Metz. And then on Tuesday, the 24th, it says went to Bertram's in the evening. That would be right next door. You'll see the Bertram's referred to here a lot. And then the next day, Wednesday, the 25th, it rained. And then it says here that on Thursday, the 26th, it says Elma went to the Steffens to help bake cookies. Now, I don't know, the Steffens were people that lived in the house which you remember as the Zagorski plumbing shop. That was the Steffen building. But it was a beautiful day. It says here, a beautiful morning. Now, on the Saturday, the 28th, there's a note here that says that Uncle John Peddlecow died. That would have been Wilhelmina's husband, and he and his wife owned that house where I was born. That is over there on Michigan Avenue. On Sunday, the 29th, it says it rained all day. The choir sang in church. Went over to Bertram's in the evening. And then it says the Clees were over. That would have been Henry Clee. He was a good friend of Henry. They taught school together. And Henry, as I said before, was postmaster for a long time. And then it says here the Steffens celebrated their 25th anniversary. So if that was 1914, let's see, that's 14, and well, they were 14, 24. They were married the year the mother was born, 1889. Then it says here on the 31st, John Peddlecow was buried. He's buried over here in the cemetery, and I remember visiting his grave here just this past summer. It says Henry Clee, the Wednesday, April 1st, Henry Clee commenced his work as postmaster of Roger City. And it says here that on Friday the 2nd of April, G.W. Grambua was appointed administrator for the estate of Mrs. Wilhelmina Peddlecow. Now, it says here Saturday there was a snowstorm in the evening. Palm Sunday on the 5th of April. Found some pussy willows. Grossman and the chorus girls were over in the evening. The 9th was election day. It says Otto Osgood went to Detroit. Osgood was the banker. He frequently went to various places on business. Alma washed. 7th, Herman was sick last night. Wednesday, the 8th of April, beastly cold. Letter from Grandma. Thursday, Holy Thursday. Alma and the boys went to Cleese and the Yules. Choir practiced at Emil Polk's. They sometimes practiced the choirs in the various individual homes rather than at the church, because in the colder weather you'd have to heat the church to have the choir practice. So if people had an organ in their home, they sometimes went to the place where they had the organ and they practiced in those homes. Friday was Good Friday. Osgood was back from his trip to Detroit. And then it says here on the Saturday, Hazel went to Alpena. Now Hazel, I can't think of her last name, I will think of it later, was one of the girls who worked at the bank, and her home was in Alpena. And then it says here the choir practice was at church, or at Bertram's. Easter Sunday. He said, I was sponsor for Edna Conant, who went to Conant's in the evening. Now Edna Conant just died here this last year, and had been the daughter of Ernest Conant. They lived in the house where you remember the McDonald's lived in. Easter Monday, Grandpa and Grandma Dramberg were down. And it said that Gertie Schmekel and Laura Bertram were over. Now Gertie Schmekel was the wife of Otto Schmekel, who had the livery store. And Gertie Schmekel's maiden name, she was a Valentine. She was the daughter of Cap Valentine, a sister to Joe Valentine. And of course Laura would have been Laura Kuhlman. Bertram. Grandpa cut his hand and Dr. Nestor put in 2 stitches. Dr. Nestor. Dr. Nestor, as I mentioned before, was one of the early doctors here in town, along with Dr. Arscott. And he came here originally to teach school. He was one of the teachers in the school system here. And before Gilpin was here. And principal, like office of principal. And then he decided that he would become a doctor. And so he took a couple years off and went to the Saginaw School of Medicine. That's the same place that Dr. Arscott went to. Went there a couple years and became a doctor, an MD. And the training must have been pretty good because those guys were pretty darn good. They serviced a lot of people, including some operations. For 2 years of medical school, it was pretty good stuff. All right, now. It says here, to Druckenmiller's for supper. Now, Druckenmiller was the minister here before Ross. In fact, he's the fellow that baptized me. But his home church was the Mulkey Church. And then he finally decided in his later years that he wanted to go back to Mulkey. And so a lot of the people in the congregation knew him well, of course, and so they would frequently take a ride out to Mulkey on a Sunday to attend church out there. Dr. Druckenmiller is buried out there in the Mulkey Cemetery. All right. Elma bought a hat from Kirby's. Kirby's had a little millinery store, which would have been right immediately adjacent to the big Bertram building. You probably remember that. There were several people that had shops in there. Walter Thomas had a shop in there for a while, and the Kirby's had a shop in there for a while. Now, it said here it was a nice day. On the Friday the 17th of April, it said, went to work without my overcoat. There was choir practice at Schmekel's. Saturday was a beautiful morning. And then on April Sunday, he said, I built the hotbed in the garden. And Pa and Ma and Gus and Martha came down from Epps. That had been his dad and mother. They stayed overnight. So people just came in and stayed overnight. You didn't have enough beds. You always had the mattresses upstairs that were filled with corn husks, but people always found a place to sleep. And but it snowed this morning. Now here's one. On Tuesday the 21st, there was a quilting bee at Bertram's. That was very common. We used to have quilting bees at the house there. People got some raw wool, washed wool, just right off the sheep's back, and they cleaned it up, and they used it for batting, and they made wool quilts. You and I had them. Well, so forth. Now, here's the 24th. It says that there was a minstrel show, I suppose probably at the rink, or the RAC Hall. It says Alma went. Zeppel put in on the Saturday, Zeppel, that would have been Julius Zeppel, put in part of the cement floor in the basement. See, that floor was put in sections. Whenever they got enough money to put it in a 10-foot square chunk, they put it in. Well, Zeppel was the mason. Now, it says the school board, he was a member of the school board, this is on Monday the 27th, the school board did not meet. We plowed the garden. I suppose you hired somebody to come in and plow the garden. Lots of times you dug the garden over yourself. But there are a lot of people that had teams, and all you had to do is tell them to go over and plow your garden up to put in the next year's crops. 29. And it says here that Lila Palmer, and I don't know who Lila Palmer was, and as I don't know, but that's what it says here. Choir practice at Abel Polk's again. Choir practice the next day at Bertram's. Paid Zempel out of Julius Zempel $19 for the cement floor. Then on Sunday there was confirmation. Went to Hawks in the afternoon. Rained Monday morning rain. And then here on the 4th also it says tank. That must have been a Ferdinand tank or Tuggy. Put up the eave troughs on the house. Now here, this is interesting. The next day, Tuesday, they planted 150 hills of potatoes. Where in the heck do you say did they plant 150 hills of potatoes? Well, in those years, in the early years, the front yard, both sides of the front yard. That was all good garden area. And we planted potatoes and corn in the front yard for many, many years. Didn't think anything of that. Other people were doing the same thing. And it said that he was also elected to the board of directors of the Rogers City Businessmen's Association. It says here, Elma was sick. Medicine by Dr. Arscott. Here it says that then Thursday, a beautiful morning, Osgood went to Alpena. He said he planted the asparagus. And then planted the peas and the beans, the carrots and the turnips. It says Elma was better. And then it says here on Saturday, got 2 bushels of potatoes from Ann Petalcow. Well, potatoes where you get potatoes. It says with Detloff, 2 race skis. And then it says Detloff had supper with us. And planted potatoes. Osgood to Alpena again. Bank examiners were here. He said he was appointed treasurer of the Rogers City Businessmen's Association. And Uncle Carl came down looking for work someplace that he could earn a few bucks, I suppose, other than on the farm. And then it said that he commenced the census. He was taking the school census for many, many years, as you'll remember. As secretary of the board, that was part of his job, to take the annual school census of the district. And he started at that time. It says here on Saturday, Osgood went fishing. Osgood went fishing. Now, on May Sunday, there was a delightful day, drove to Metz. Now, here's an interesting note. Grandma Gramberg, born 1868. Now, she was born in Detroit. The only one of that Hardy's family, of the big Hardy's family that came over here at that time, that was born in Germany, was Ed. Ed was the fellow that you know that was on the old Gramberg farm. The youngest girl in the family, by the name of Emma, was the one that married Ed Hardy's. But all the rest of those people were born either in Detroit or they're born out here in Belknap. Now, it says here that a man by the name of William Stricker drowned at Lake Ella. I know some of the Strickers, but I don't know what that. And then, let's see here. On the 21st, Oz got to Alpena again. You see, he was a promoter. He was trying to get money or make investments wherever he could. He took census in the German district and at Calcite. The German district in those days, they called the area around the Lutheran Church. In Calcite, of course, there were people living, and still people were living at Crawford's Quarry, which was there before Rogers City. That was the area when you went through Calcite toward Little Lake. That's where the original village, the village of Crawford's Quarry. The Crawford family, that's where they started. Alma was house cleaning. Harry not feeling well. This was in May. Now, Sunday 24th, to Bertram's in the evening. Now, auto ride with Shemako taking a census. Caught 3 nice trout. Lipke, Gust, and Carl were down to Rogers City. Carl went fishing to Swan River. Sent Pa, that meant to his dad, $150 on a certificate to apply and a note of $350 left. So he apparently had borrowed $500 from Grandpa Grambua. Today was Decoration Day. Fishing at Trout River, 3 fish. It was over to the 31st, went over to Detlof's. He was the sponsor for Ida Dora Caroline Detloff. That was one of Charlie's daughters. She later became a school teacher and was teaching here in one of the years when I first came back. Now, Alma's sick. June 14th. I bought an overcoat from Hemp's for $12.50. Osgood came back and went fishing. Dora came and got Herman and Harry. And the reason that will be explained here in a minute. To Alpena this afternoon. And then they took a boat. Mother hadn't been feeling well, and they recommended that she go down to Toledo or Detroit to find out what the problem was. They suspected it was here, that the Dr. Arscott suspected it was appendectomy, but they weren't quite sure. So here on Sunday the 21st, this is on the boat to Toledo. Met Louise, that would have been Louise Dramberg, at the Detroit dock. And then she got on, and they went on to Toledo, and there they met Bertha at the dock in Toledo. Those people went back and forth between Detroit and Toledo on what they called the inner urban. There was a train that ran between the two towns. Well, visited the Lukes. Visited with the Crefts for dinner. I went to the art museum. And went to Crefts again for the night. Now, on the 12th, they consulted with Dr. Green, and he advised an operation. Elma went to the hospital in the p.m., and I went to Fres Herzl's for the night, and then to Robinwood Hospital. Elma operated on at 8 o'clock a.m. Dr. Green, Dr. Gilletier, and Schroff. On the 14th of June, he slept at the hospital for the night. Mrs. Hoagley was the nurse in attendance. Elma spent a fair night. Elma fair. Second. Elma eats toast. Has some gas problems. 16th, slept at the hospital. Elma had a fair night. Back ache with a lot of gas. Crefts for the night. The Crefts and the Perlicks and the Lukes were all relatives of great-great-grandmother Pakeys. They were all kids of her kids of her sisters and also of some of her daughters. Now, then I had dinner at Hattie's. Then Hattie Looks, Hattie Herzl's. Alma doing fine. Went over to see Will Kreft. Alma's stitches removed. Paid Dr. Green $100. Louise came from Detroit. Stayed with Hattie for the night. Paid the hospital $15 for the room and $2.45 for meals. Went with Louise to Detroit and then paid $5 to Alpena. In other words, he stayed down there for a while, and then he came home. Went to Rogers in the morning. Aunt Martha came down and cleaned the house, washed the dishes. This is because Herman and I, during that period of time, were out in the Mets, staying with Graham and Dora. And he was here alone. There was no letter from Toledo, had a bank meeting, went to Bertram's in the evening. Mabel left for Alpena again, and no news from Toledo. Went to Cleese for the evening, and there was a letter from Alma, and then he planted some beans. Another letter from Alma, choir practice. Dinner with Martha. A letter from Bertha. Alma worse, it says. To Bertram's for dinner on the 28th of July. Church meeting and choir practice. To Cleese for supper and played Spitzer. Alma incision open according to a letter from Bertha. Martha's birthday. Card from Bertha. Choir practice. A man was killed at Calcite. July 1st, raining. To Cleese in the evening. Raining. Card from Bertha. Choir practice. Supper at Detloff's. Letter from Alma, better. Dinner at Yule's. Supper at Detloff's. On Sunday, very, very hot. And on, let's see here. On Wednesday, it says here, a letter from Alma. And choir practice at Polk's. Thursday, no letter from Alma. Bank examiners were here. The 10th letter from Alma. On the 11th, Grandpa Gramberg down. Carl went home for haying. To Cleese in the evening. Letter from Alma. Expect to be home on the 18th. Hi. Well, today is another day, and we'll see what we can do about making another tape. Now, today is the first day of winter, December 21st, 1996. And we've got about 8 or 10 inches of snow on the level out here in the backyard. We've got some black squirrels, got as high as 7 at certain times, 5 of them out here right now. And they feed at the bird feeder. When the birds aren't in there, they're in there, and they're in there to kick the birds out. And so there's always a lot of fun. Sometimes I have as high as 7. These are black squirrels and some grays. You ordinarily would have fox squirrels, but these seems to have vamoosed out of here when the blacks moved in. Well, looks as if winter's here for the next 30 days at least, probably, until March 31st. So we'll say, well, we'll wait for spring, or think spring. Now, when we last left you, Dad had just gone down to Toledo to get Mother, who had an appendectomy at Rabblewood Hospital, where Bertha and Louise, her sisters, were our aunts. And Mother had sent a note to Dad that she was going to be discharged on the 18th of July. And so Dad went down to get her. And there's a note here on the 19th, Sunday the 19th of July. It said that at the dock from Toledo, the folks and boys at the dock to meet us, a little tired but feeling fine. And then the next day it says, Alma feeling fine. Osgood ditched. Now, he had an automobile. I suppose he ran in the ditch. Now, the roads were very rough in those days, you got to remember. And going into the ditch wasn't unusual at all because he hit some ruts and it would throw you. It says here also that Mrs. Yule came over to see Mother, her neighbor next door. And then on the next day it says here that all it entered that Mrs. Bertram came over to see Alma. And then it says on Wednesday, one very hot day. Martha was doing our washing. That would be Aunt Martha Litke. She and Gus sometimes lived here in town when he had a job here at the mill, and other times they would go back. They also had a home in Metz. And so during the time that Mother was laid up, Martha frequently came down to do the washing. And it says here that on the 23rd of July, it says Mrs. Ernest Grambua came over. And Martha and Gus stopped in. And then it says here on Friday the 24th, it says Harry was a little sick. And Detloff came over. Alma feeling good on the 25th. And and then it also says here that Herman, Harry, and I went to Little Lake with the Detloff. I suppose Detloff's car. We caught 10 perch and 2 pike. And Detloff stayed for supper. And then it said on the Monday the 27th, Herman scalded his arm. There was a school board meeting. And then Teresa Mendy came over. That would have been Nalo Mendy's wife. You would probably remember the... Now, I might say in all of this that George, especially you and Grace and Treese, knew some of these people, of course, later on in your life. And I just happened to be born probably about 10 or years, a little bit before you were, and so I got to know these people very, very early. And it's interesting that some of those people stayed around for a long, long time, and even some of the nieces and nephews knew some of these people. And then every once in a while it'll say in here that Eddie came down. Well, that would be Uncle Ed Grambua, who you remember lived later on in Mount Pleasant. Well, Ed didn't get married until about 1923, I believe, that he married Jessie. And in the early days, he also taught school in the Metz area. And then he frequently came down here to visit Mother and Dad. He also served for a time during World War I. I don't know whether he went overseas, but he was in camp. And then he was a teacher out here in the country schools. Then later on, he made arrangements, some type or other. He went to Mount Pleasant to school, and then he also went to Michigan State. And he became quite a specialist in agriculture and taught agriculture at Mount Pleasant High School. And a lot of the teachers in northern Michigan, especially the ag teachers, knew him from the work that he did in agriculture at Mount Pleasant, especially working with the young guys who were going to go out and become Smith Hughes teachers. Some of these kids later on, after they left Mount Pleasant, they went to Michigan State and became fully qualified to become agricultural teachers. So Ed was well known throughout Michigan, especially in agriculture. And then to pick up things, I'm not going to mention everything because some of this is quite repetitious. And then it says here, on Monday, August 1914, it says, I got beat in the school election. He was on the Board of Education, apparently got beat. And the people that were elected were a fellow named Fleming and Dr. Arscott. And then it says here on Tuesday, the 4th of August, Martha was over and helped with the washing. And Coonert, that would be Ernest Coonert, our neighbor there, became the new secretary of the school board. And then it says here, Grossman, Gloser, and Grambua went fishing to Little Lake and caught 12 fish. The guys went fishing a lot. And he said he turned the school books over to Ernest Coonert. He was out for a while, but he came back in a couple of years. Osgood went to Alpena again. Hazel was on her vacation. That was the girl that worked at the bank. Martha came over and was doing some sewing. And bought shoes for the boys, it says here. Alma feeling better. And ordered a barrel of flour. Barrel of flour, I guess it's probably about 200 pounds, I suppose. I don't know, but close to that. And then it says here on Sunday, the August 14th, it rained a little. Eddie and Otto and Louise and Dora returned to Metz. Apparently it stayed overnight. And then it says, went to Dr. Schrader, the dentist. He's the fellow that I said talked with Dad in the early days, became a dentist, practiced here for a while, and then went to Ann Arbor, and became part of the faculty at the dental school at the University of Michigan. Then Louise evidently must have been up here from her duties in nursing in Detroit and Toledo. And it says that Otto, Bertha, Louise, Dora, and Grandpa all came down. Otto and Dora attended a dance at the roller rink. That wouldn't be that same rink that we're talking about. Apparently people came, there must have been some special dance. And then it says the Cordes girls were over. And on Saturday it says Herman and Harry went with Martha back to Metz. And then it said we went to church on Sunday in the morning. Mr. Detloff come over, and Mr. Kreft came over. And Mr. Kreft came up from Toledo. As I say, the Krefts were related to the Drybergs, and they were relatives of great-great-grandmother Patke. Gus Lutke went back to Metz. Elma was sick. And a few of these things, because I know this gets quite repetitious. Then Ada went home. Now, Ada Schultz was one of the girls that worked at the house, one of the country girls. I don't know just what Schultz family that she was from. But he said they went over to Bertram's for the evening. And then the next day he completed his work at the dentist. And Detloffs came over. See, those people have visited back and forth a lot. Now, this is one interesting. It says Pa and Ma, that would have been Grambua, Herman Grambua and Amelia, and Ernest Bright came down. Now, Ernest Bright was a relative of Ernestine Grambua, Grandpa Grambua's first wife. There was the Bright family in Alpena that lived there for many, many years. And in fact, the Ernest Bright family lived at 203 Dawson Street, Alpena. I remember meeting that guy. He this Ernest would have been a nephew of Ernestine, the my grandmother, the one that's buried at the Schrader Cemetery. It says here on Thursday, it says, I got a card from Willie. I don't know where Willie was, but Willie, of course, was Uncle Willie, and he's the one that married Cassie Nowlin, who had been a teacher at the Met School. And he worked here for a while. He worked in Onaway, I think, and he worked in a variety of places. Some of his family, of course, some of his family, Willie's family, were born in Onaway. I think the two boys that I know of were born in Onaway. I think that the girl, Lois, as we know her, I think she was born in Lansing. So the people kind of moved around looking for a place to make a living. And then it says here that there was choir practice, and drove out to Metz with somebody, because it's 1914, they didn't have their own car. And then it says here, Mr. and Mrs. Hine came to visit. I suppose that's from Metz. Alma stayed in Metz. And here's where Mother said, she pointed this out to me. It says here that Harry is lame. It was the beginning of that polio that I had. Mother said I wasn't particularly sick, but they noticed that I was starting to limp. And that was the beginning of the polio. And in time, of course, as I got a little bit older, a little bit grew, then the limp became more pronounced. And the crippling of the right foot and leg became more pronounced. And there wasn't much that they could do except take me to a doctor. But at the time that it occurred, Arscott wasn't quite sure what would happen. Now, polio was very common. He temporarily diagnosed of that, but he wasn't sure. Now, Cooner and I went fishing, and then it says here Thursday the 3rd of July of September. It says Harry was still lame. Mother pointed this out. And then it says Mrs. Dumpsch visiting. I imagine that's probably from the Hawks area. Bertha was with us. I suppose she came up by boat. And Irma and Herbert were down. Irma and Herbert Hine were down. Now later on, of course, you'll see references here where they bought a house in Rogers City. Brady girls were down. Brady girls stayed for supper. Saw the doctor. I suppose that means Arscott about Harry's leg. Labor Day on September 7th, went to Swan Lake hunting ducks. Now it says here, also on Labor Day, it says Irma and Herbert Hine. Irma married Herbert Hine. And Mrs. Erskine came over. Well, now I don't know whether that means there was a Dr. Erskine in town. He originally came here to teach school, and one of those fellows, as I say again, that came up here a while, and they went down and became doctors, and came back here and practiced medicine. And it says here that somebody was sewing uniforms. I don't know, I can't read it. Now, you got to remember, Dad wrote this stuff with a straight pen. And some of this writing is just about 1/8 of an inch high, and it's very, very difficult to read at times. He had a good hand, but the lines are only 1/4 inch apart, and sometimes the letters only half of that. It says here on Thursday, Osgood went to Alpine again. He said, and he got a bushel of peaches for Alma to can. And then it says Alma went to the show. And there was a party at Hasenberg's. Now, I don't know what Hasenberg that is. Schrader and I out in the woods. And that would have been Al Schrader. Henry and Lena were down. And Martha was down. Alma took sick in the afternoon. Osgood went to Detroit. Herman and Harry playing outside. This was on September 14th. Went trout fishing with Trader. And let's see here. We go on here over to Detloff's in the evening. Dora came this afternoon and picked 4 bushel of apples. There was a big fire on here on the 20th in back of Hornbacher's. Now those forest fires, everyone will pop out. This isn't the Metz fire, this is after that. Even when I was a kid, there were big fires at the edge of town that would ordinarily break out. Sometimes these burned new property, sometimes they just burned what they call slashings. And because a lot of this stuff had already been harvested. This was 1914, but there was certain amount of lumbering going on. But forest fires were very chilling affairs. And it says here, Little Lake for supper, 94 degrees. And now it says here that Otto notified this morning that the fires in Metz are bad and dangerous. And then a little later on, it says down in here that Otto called again that the danger of fires had passed. Now, it says here, on Sunday, September 27th, this morning went home. Was hunting with Henry in the swamp. Went to Hardeese's in the afternoon. Hunted chipmunks and squirrels with a .22 rifle. One then went back to Metz, and from Metz drove to Rogers City. People were brutes for punishment. And then it says Ada and Edna McCutcheon were over. Now Edna McCutcheon is the one that Johnny Wing, you'd know her, that was your aunt. She married George Wing and went to Detloff's and picked apples again. Picked apples again on the 29th. And it says here that on the 30th, John Nagel brought pears to can. Potatoes were 30 cents a bushel. Mabel Kaiser, that's her name, left for California. That was the girl, Mabel Kaiser, that I told you about. We finally get her name. She was from Alpena originally. Then they had called from Metz. I don't know where the phones were in the individual homes at that time there yet, or they had to go to the general store. But it says that Carl called, and that says that the fires were not too bad. Sunday, went hunting. Elma back. Elma was back. I don't know where she went. Osgood went to Alpena. Card from Bertha. Here is a wedding, a couple of weddings. That one was Mary Dust married at Altman in the Metz area. Then here's one that you'll know. It says Fred McCutcheon married May Schalk. Then let's see here. What else we got here? I got to get these books. Pages are so darn small. Elma went over to the Peddle Cows, and I visited Clee and Grossman. Went hunting in the afternoon, got 2 birds and a rabbit. Grandpa and Grandma and Hazel and Helen Zimmerman and Freddie Zimmerman came in and stayed for dinner. Dug potatoes. Dug potatoes on the front yard. Elma went to the Detloffs. Osgood went to Onaway. And then on the Wednesday, he said, went for a little hunt on the hill. Dad would do that. He'd come back from work, grab his gun, and away he'd go, top of the hill. Because the top of the hill there, that was all open. I mean, that was bird country up there. Just on top of Heps Hill. Saturday there was a masquerade ball at the roller rink. I suppose they probably went. And Sunday they went to church in the morning, stayed home all day. And let's see here, a little hunt on the hill on Tuesday. Dug more potatoes. Bertram's were